Welcome to The Growth Show with me as your host, Joe Camberato. I am an entrepreneur who created my company, National Business Capital, from literally $0 out of my spare bedroom to over $2 billion in business loans secured for entrepreneurs nationwide. Since 2007, I have seen just about every type of business. I provide money and help entrepreneurs access capital to scale fast, but I also know that it's possible for you as you scale to replace yourself, to build systems, processes, and great teams of people that can live on without you so you can actually enjoy your life and your company can still grow. I will not only tell you the peaks and valleys of my story, but I will also bring on world-class entrepreneurs to tell their stories and share their lessons on their growth journeys. Welcome to The Growth Show. All right, everybody, welcome to The Growth Show. It's always good to have you. As you know, my show is all about people growing, making it happen in their business and also helping others grow. Have a great guest today, Rick Watson from RMW Commerce. Rick is an e-commerce expert, and really his goal and mission is to help people make money online. And there's a lot to talk about there, and I'm excited to talk to him today because, you know, a lot of businesses that we work with that were maybe manufacturing items, selling items, you know, are trying to figure out how to do that online in, you know, an effective way. So I'm excited to unpack that, and also want to hear about your story, Rick. So, a lot of good stuff to talk about. You know, thanks for coming on the show today.
Yeah, thanks so much, Joe. I'm happy to speak today a little bit about my experience and journey, as well as to meet some of your listeners too. So,
Yeah, and our listeners are small to medium sized businesses all across the country, a lot of different industries. We work with companies that are manufacturing wholesale distributors. A lot of those have an old school way of doing business, and where they're supplying goods to stores, and then they're also selling direct to consumer as well. And it feels like a lot of things have gone to this hybrid world. So I think there's a lot to talk about there. But tell us a little bit about yourself and really what you do, and how did you get started on your journey to growing your business?
yeah, let's start at the end first. About 6 years ago, I started a e-commerce consulting business to help, generally middle market and enterprise retailers, manufacturers take advantage of digital channels better, whether it's their own direct-to-consumer channels or through online marketplaces like eBay and Amazon. Like I'm sure some of your listeners are on, or some of them are obviously selling into big box. And so generally as a consultant, working with a lot of the larger customers, but I think that also has a lot of lessons for entrepreneurs and small businesses around the world, because everyone wants to know how to compete with the big the big fish in the pond. But the reality is they have sometimes more challenges than the small the small
Yeah,
players,
yeah,
just because they have 20 years of history and bureaucracy to work from, whereas new business owners have they have energy and they have advantages and they have carte blanche to sort of do what they want to do. So I'd say that's kind of the starting point, from the business. And I've worked with a lot of different companies, including folks like Ann Klein, currently working with ABC Home, a number of brands that people in the audience might have heard of. So,
it's really cool, and you work with a lot of different companies, and it's interesting to hear, because I think a lot of times people think, I mean, I've done this in my own business. I hear this from other business owners, where you think that these big companies just have it all figured out. They've got tons of people, and it must be so easy, and wow, that would be amazing, and endless budgets and all this stuff. But it's not easy. And I think as you grow, it's important to make sure how do you keep your business entrepreneurial? Because we've gone up against this with bigger companies, and you're like, oh my God, it takes them 6 months to roll out like a new simple piece of software. Like you don't even have to like really integrate. So I think it's important to not forget that as a smaller company. And listen, a smaller company today, you can have 100 employees, and what people consider small and large are different, but you can really compete. And I think too, it's gotten easier to compete as a smaller guy because there's so many pre-built technologies like a
Mm,
Shopify website. You have companies
right.
like BigCommerce and other platforms now that you can just kind of be up and running and off to the races. Where I mean, really, only like what 6, 7, 8, 10 years ago, like all this stuff had to be like you had to
Right.
spend like six figures to build out a shopping cart.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah,
so
it's gotten a lot less expensive to do that, and I think if there's sort of uh, one or two things that I think separates the small companies that can get things done and the big companies that can, it's just really energy, ownership, and focus.
yeah,
I guess ultimately, if you're the boss, then you're in control of what happens next. Where if you're in a bigger company, you're convincing somebody who has to convince something to get someone done, and maybe you'll get money for it, and then they'll forget about it a month from now. Meanwhile, if you're an entrepreneur, well, you have way less resources. You also don't have to answer to anyone else, and so you can do what you feel are the
get
right
it done.
things. You can get stuff done, and you can focus on your market, which in many cases, if it's if you work at Amazon, if it's not $1 billion opportunity, it's not a good idea, right?
Yeah, yeah, I love getting shit done. So I'm with you on that, and I love what you said: energy, focus, and uh,
Ownership.
ownership. Yeah, that's I feel like that is like the key to success. I think we need to like brand that or something.
Yeah. You have a new podcast motto. You can use it.
Yeah, I love it. Energy, focus, and ownership. I mean, that's probably the key right there. Yeah, and it's funny. I mean, listen, at the same time, you know, as these things have become easier, it's also made has made it competitive, right?
Mhm.
So that which is interesting. What do you think? Like, where do you say like you come in and
Mm.
do you help people that are like like a lot of pre-established businesses that are like, hey, I'm selling these things and I want to move to
Mhm.
online. Is it people that are looking to start up from zero? Like what do you say like your
Yeah, so I mean,
ideal?
I see the whole range. I mean, the ideal consulting clients are usually the bigger clients because they have the big names and the bigger budgets. But lots of people talk to me about, hey, how do I start an e-commerce business? What should I do first, second, third? I mean, I would say, look, staying power is the first thing I always think about. Like, what are you curious about? What are you passionate about? What could you imagine in your life that you've been interested in for a number of years or will be interested in a few years from now? So get an idea that you're going to naturally want to continue exploring, whether it's because it interests you and your family or you think it's a big opportunity in the world that you would like to bring to life. So I think that's kind of number one is like get
Yeah,
some leverage behind your idea because ultimately you're going to need staying power to succeed. No business can succeed in 3 months and then you're going to make it big. It takes time and you're going to have to wander in the desert. And to do that, um, if you're not excited about the idea, you're going to give up. So that's kind of number one. The second is before people want to sell something online, I would love people to get the idea in their head that they should try to develop expertise around an area or get curious about an area and start sharing that with others. To me, the way to start selling is to first develop an audience. How do you
yeah,
develop an audience? I would say in the world, it's never been like people used to stand on a street corner and yell at other people, right? Now we have social media. We can broadcast, any of us, from YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, LinkedIn, depending on who your audience is. Those are probably three or four of the top channels that you can develop your audience, and it costs you literally nothing. Don't buy an ad. Just keep, just keep doing it every day. Talk about what you love, interview people you love, talk about your niche of products. If you're into hunting, talk about hunting and what you did and the equipment you bought and what you did that day. If it's health or fitness, like whatever it is your niche is, talk about your niche and be really clear on the message you're trying to get across. Not in each episode or post, but if people think that you're authentic and have wisdom to impart, you don't need to be the expert. What you need to be is somebody that has credibility and is believable, because ultimately there's no one expert at anything. And so
Yeah.
all of us started from somewhere. And so even if you've only been doing this for 6, 12 months, you're 6 to 12 months ahead of somebody who started this yesterday. And so
Yeah.
that was always the idea I had. And I think one of the challenges to developing an audience, and it's kind of the word I use for this, is putting yourself out there. How do you get the courage to put yourself out there every day and not care about like imposter syndrome or those sorts of things? It's just to remember that you don't have to be the expert in the
Yeah. Or
world.
perfect.
You don't have
Yeah.
to be perfect to
Yeah.
contribute something to someone else.
Yeah, it's true. And I think we all, if you really are into something, good at something, it's a skill set, niche, your business, your passion, I think we really all know more than we realize sometimes.
Right.
And yeah, and there's not one person that has all the answers. So,
Yep.
but I like what you said there, because I think a lot of people think about, right, what product am I going to sell? And then they're trying, like, all right, let me go spend money on Facebook ads or Google or
Yeah.
whatever. And, they burn through budgets, and there's no, like, you don't have this like organic audience that's fueling something. And then, it's funny, you mentioned, like, I don't know if you said like fishing, like, I don't know, like, but
Yeah,
you come
exactly.
across some of
Anything.
these guys that like love fishing, and they just have they're literally their phone with them, making the like most lo-fi videos ever, just talking about what they love. And they have a million followers on YouTube,
A
so
hundred
it's
percent.
like,
And
it's
to me,
amazing.
like, which business is more sustainable?
Yeah.
That
Yeah,
business
seriously.
that found a niche that's going to be copied by a manufacturer overseas tomorrow, or somebody that has 1 million followers, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so that idea that developing your audience and your authentic voice is the most important asset you have. That, to me, that's step one in developing any kind of business these days, period. Forget e-commerce, anything, consulting services. I don't care what you're selling. I think that's super valuable.
Yeah.
And then third is, um, it kind of depends on what direction you want to go in. Do you want to manufacture something, or do you want to just point people to the right products and and make money from affiliate business? I always like, before you figure out like what the best, again, spend money on manufacturing, do reviews of every product in the space that you love. Figure out what's great about them. Share that knowledge with others. Make money from their affiliate programs. And you can actually learn what products are the best, which products makes money, the faults and the opportunities with them, before you think about like, okay, maybe I might want to manufacture this one day. At least if you have that idea, if you're developing your audience, you're developing that expertise, you're starting to kind of build your base of knowledge so that you can make smarter decisions about, um, I want to make my own branded product that's different. You'll be able to explain very clearly how it's different than someone else.
Yeah. It's interesting because we've worked and funded a number of companies that have a product that's manufactured, that's a unique product. They're selling to big box retailers. They're in a number of different stores, and then they want us have like a little direct to consumer
Hmm.
channel. Where and these are sometimes folks that have been manufacturing, doing this 10, 20, 30 years. Where does someone get started? Like they come to you and all they've known is like they're going through the wholesale distribution channels, right? And now I got to have a website and take payments and a
Hmm.
shipping and receiving and like a little bit of customer service. Where do you get started?
Yeah, I mean, getting started is, I mean, obviously, assuming you have incorporated a business because you're selling to retail, but you haven't done anything online. I mean, the reality is, for an entrepreneur that has an idea in the morning and wants a website by in that day
11.
or in a couple of days from now,
Yeah.
Shopify is really a great system, because you could just
Yeah.
sign up
Yeah.
online, pay a few bucks a month, and you could build a pretty big website and not pay a whole bunch of money for it. I mean, that's kind of one way to do it. The other way to do it, if you don't want to even figure out Shopify, is set up a TikTok shop or something. If
Yeah.
your audience is on TikTok, sometimes these social platforms have a way to sell through those channels. Like if you're on Instagram and you have 1 million Instagram followers, I'm just going to use this for example. You can set up an Instagram shop and your videos can talk about that. That could be one way to just sell direct. Um, Shopify is nice because then you're not limited to selling only on the one social network that you're selling through. You can then point anyone from any network to sort of your one home base uh, online commerce platform, which would be Shopify, or you mentioned BigCommerce it's kind of a similar kind of setup. Shopify is obviously a much bigger service at this point.
Yeah, it makes sense. What I find interesting recently, and I've seen this come up a lot, um, where you have companies, I'll use an example. I don't know if they're doing this, but like Dollar Shave Club, where
Hmm.
they were all direct to consumer, burning money,
Hmm.
on, ads. And
Right.
then, as they're like, we're going direct to consumer, you know, kind of screw giving up money, to, you know, having it, in the stores. And now, they're putting their products in stores
Right.
and like realizing like, wait, maybe I need this like hybrid model where, hey,
Yeah.
you can actually make money by getting your products in stores. So like, just like, what do you like? Is that, what do you, like, curious on what your thoughts are on that?
Yeah. I think, look, like anything, sometimes ideas go through a little bit of a hype cycle,
Yeah.
and people realize that there's
Like
something,
everything.
yeah, there's something here, but it doesn't mean it has to be the only thing.
Yeah.
And I think direct to consumer kind of went through a little bit of that kind of in the 2015, 17
Honeymoon
timeframe.
phase.
And then, obviously at the start of COVID, when retail shut down, everyone thinks they're a genius for going online, right? And so the reality is most businesses need to have their product wherever their customers might want to see you or shop.
Yeah.
And the reality is, globally or in the United States, e-commerce is still only, again, depending on your category, between 50, on the low end, in like grocery, it's like 10, 12%. And the high end, maybe books, 80 people, percent of people buy books online, compared to in a bookstore, something like that. So anyway, sort of depends on your category, but I would say broadly, if 20% of people buy products online versus 80% who buy them in stores, if you're not in stores, you're limiting your market opportunity. And so
Yeah.
direct to consumer, if you don't need to think about like, oh, how do I get a relationship with Walmart or with Lowe's or Home Depot or somebody like that, nobody, you don't have to ask anyone to set up a website. You could just sort of do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and
That makes sense.
if you want to be big, then you have to spend a lot of money very quickly. But if you
Yeah.
don't, there's almost a wisdom that I always find in like, don't try to be big quickly ahead of, don't get over your skis in business. And you probably advise, I'm sure you advise people this when people get money. Like just because you have capital doesn't need you need to spend it all next week, right? Like
Correct.
have
Yeah.
a plan that you're going to be in business 3 years from now and understand what are the cash flows that are going to come from this money. And so if the idea that if I can slowly grow my audience week over week, month over month by building that audience, and I notice that as I add audience, I also add sales, then you're on a good trend. And if you're
Yeah.
not trying to immediately add a whole bunch of advertising dollars to it that could, deplete your cash flow, then what you have is a growing small business, which is itself an enviable proposition that nobody can take from you.
Yeah. And I think too, like to your point, don't blow your money. Like, I always say like we're all running hedge funds or we're all private equity, right? Meaning
Right.
when you own a business, like your job is to take capital and deploy it and make a return on it, right? So if
Hmm.
you're buying a product or manufacturing a product, it's distributing it, selling it, making a return, rinse and repeating. So I think if you look at things that way, but not, I think you can't get caught up. I think this is where a lot of, like you were saying, back in 2015, direct to consumer, it was like this big wow thing.
Right.
But it's like, where, like you said, like where your customers, and it doesn't have to be like, well, we have to only do like, why can't you go in all these places that your customers are? And e-commerce is a part of it, along with other channels. And I think that's where people get stuck, where they've been doing things one way, and
Hmm.
it's like, well, we don't do that. Well, it's like, well, why not if your customers are
Yeah.
there?
Yeah, I would say you think about this as a risk for small businesses, but for big businesses, it's worse because you have these big corporate processes that reinforce doing business one way.
Yeah.
Whereas as an entrepreneur, you should really just feel free to
Yes.
follow
Yeah. Yeah.
whatever, wherever your customers are. And we wrote a report for one of our customers about a year ago called the Modern Brand Playbook, and one of the feelings was that it used to be a customer would see your product three different places. So like in Google, on social media, and somewhere else. Now it's like 7 places they need to see your brand before they buy it. So it gives you some idea that you need to not just be online, or need to not just be in one store. The more places they see you, the more like, oh, this is a real company that I can trust and is credible. And I think the tools to do that, to your point, have never really been easier.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. Yeah, like you really do have to be everywhere today, and people need to see something about you like 8 times to make a buying decision, which is really crazy when you think about that.
I know.
When I love talking with experts, and experts like yourself, and I love pulling experts into my business to help avoid like landmines
Hmm.
and big giant speed bumps. You know, Talking about some great stuff here, and it all makes sense to me. What do you think? What are some things you could share for people that are looking to go this route? Like, hey, here's like some things to watch out for, or avoid, or everyone always gets caught in this trap. Like, if we could help save some of those entrepreneurs out there, time and money and frustration, I think that's a win.
Yeah, I think drop shipping always seems like an easy way to make money. You're like, it's someone else's product. I'm just gonna sell it. And so as a result, it seems like a free way to make money.
Yeah,
The
yeah,
the the reality is, if if you can do it, then a million other people can do it too.
yeah,
And the only way your website is going to get noticed is if you advertise it. Then
yeah,
it's not your audience, you're trying to buy someone else's audiences. So I think most people who have tried to take this sort of shortcut route to developing an audience, finding a niche, finding whoever your ideal customer is, building your expertise, building your audience, all those steps I kind of mentioned at the beginning of our discussion, they're just like, I'm going to find a product and I'm just going to start pumping it with ads. You're going to be a flash in the pan. And so any of these sort of expert courses, I'm going to set up like, you're going to make $1 million in 90 days. Like, please, if there's one thing I could impart to you today, like, don't buy any of this garbage.
save your money.
Save
Yes,
your money, right?
yeah,
And like, it's simpler than you think, and it's simpler than you think, and it's harder than you think. To me, what the great benefit you have is patience as an entrepreneur, as long as your cash flow supports it. If
yeah,
you are if your business is in trouble and you have to make money to make your mortgage payment, or then I won't say it's gambling, but it's a much riskier proposition. You need to make one big bet, and that bet's going to pay off, or you're going to go out of business.
yep,
And look, businesses like that work sometimes, but they
yeah,
also fail a whole bunch of times.
yeah, yeah.
And that could be, and it's not just in e-commerce. It's like, oh, I bought the wrong location for real estate, and um, I didn't get the traffic to my store that I thought, because of something there. So
I think, and I kind of this, been I feel like this, what really what you've been saying is all of this stuff takes work. And I think that's the problem is
Yeah.
people hear online, drop shipping, e-commerce. It seems like, oh, this is just going to be, I can, and they had this vision of the guy with the laptop, in a robe sitting out by the pool, somewhere like super remote by the beach. And that's just like going to be easy. And listen, I think there's absolutely some people out there that are doing it and God bless them, but
Right.
there's still have been creative in what they're doing and probably doing a lot of things that you said, built an audience,
Right.
things. And it took time and it takes a lot of work and a lot of reinvestment and focus. And I just think when people hear e-com online and drop shipping, that it means like I'm not. It's going to be easy,
Yeah, it's going
And
to be easy, or it's a foolproof thing. I can't lose money. And the reality is, if you can't lose money, it doesn't mean you make any money either.
yeah, yeah,
And so if I have a product I can sell, I can buy it for $5, I could sell it for $10, and but I have to buy $5 in ads to sell it, then I haven't made any money and I wasted a day of time.
yeah.
So I feel like there a lot of people who start those kinds of businesses end up on a hamster wheel. And I think you mentioned about like everyone's being their own private equity. I that really resonates with me because ultimately all we have is two things. We have money and we have time.
That's it.
And what do we invest our time and money? Like this is our life force, right? And so that is if you know in your heart of hearts that your customer service and your product are not good enough yet, then that's where you need to invest your time. Because advertising it more is just going to help you lose money faster. But if your product is great and the last 10 people you showed it to have said, "Wow, this is a great product. I wish you had shown it to me last year," then that's probably a time you should be investing more in advertising, right? And so
Yeah,
I think that yeah, I don't know if it's a private equity mindset, but you have to be smart where you invest in your resources depending on where you are in that product development life cycle. Just because you have a product doesn't mean it's the right time to advertise it like widely everywhere.
yeah. Makes sense. Yeah, makes complete sense. It's all time and money, and I think
Yeah.
it's super important, especially in the beginning. Time and money are like the two most important things. And money and capital is like the oxygen, and your time is super limited, especially if you don't have a
Yeah.
team of people to help you.
And I think like you mentioned the starting point. Obviously, you can have a basic product that you set up. Maybe you built it yourself. Maybe you had it manufactured overseas or locally, and now you can sell something. But this is version one of your product. And so if your distribution or if your marketing campaigns are small, making sure you can consistently get repeat business is super important before you kind of well, I'm advertising, I'm spending $10,000 a month on advertising, or I'm spending whatever it is your budget is. If your customers aren't happy, then you should stop spending more money than that until you fix your
Yeah,
product
yeah,
to get to
yeah.
that next level. And so I think from there, ensuring, although you need to have access to a certain number of customers to get feedback on your product and service, and so I think there is some degree of that, but I think it can be cheaper than you think. You don't need to spend millions of dollars to get an overwhelming amount of feedback for something that you know in your gut is already like not ready for prime time yet.
Agreed. Yeah, I think it's super important that more sales does not solve problems. And I think people get caught in that trap. Just bringing more sales, and we need to make more money. And a lot of times, I mean, we find with companies that we're funding, and companies that are doing a few million in sales to
Hmm.
10 to 50 million. Um, sometimes where we identify issues or cash flow issues, it's actually a process issue. It's not a like
Mm.
a and if they nail the process, then they can actually, when they're borrowing capital, from my team and I, then they can put it to work and it's effective and they can actually maximize their return. But those little process issues I see trip people up a lot, and they just keep they'll just keep going after more sales and borrowing and throwing money at a problem. But borrowing's great, especially like when you can put money to work and be really effective with it.
Right.
And sometimes that's a process issue. Sometimes it's a shipping and receiving issue, an accounting issue, a billing issue. Like we see those things all like constantly. It's negotiating terms with a vendor issue. Like there's a
Hmm.
number of these things. You tweak a little here, a little there. Like um, you don't need as much capital as you think, or
Yeah.
if you're borrowing, you can like completely crush it.
And kind of my background, I kind of grew up as a technologist in software engineering, and I got into e-commerce kind of back in the early days in '99, working for other people most of my life until I founded my own business about 6 years ago. Um, and I got to learn from the venture capital industry because some of the software companies are involved when they were taking venture capital money. And I was lucky enough to be involved with a company that was relatively successful and can kind of see how they did it. But you could also see, like from Silicon Valley and like the whole story of people who raise too much money
Yeah.
before they understand that if I raise $10 in investor money, I better have some idea how that $10 is going to become $30. Is it going to become $50? Is it going to become $70? And if you don't have that level of at least rough sophistication, then
Yep.
you probably should be taking less money right now until you
Yeah.
figure out what that conversion factor is. And then once you get more sophisticated, then you're able to put more money to work more efficiently. Otherwise, like as you said, if it's a process issue, it's like the money's going to run out at some point. Like it doesn't. I don't care how much money you raise; it's not going to last forever.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I definitely hear that. I've talked about this before. I was just commenting on this with something that over borrowing is just as bad as under borrowing. There is like a real
Hmm.
balance, and you got to know your numbers, and you have to put money to work the right way, effectively. I think that's why a lot of those VC firms have gotten in a lot of trouble. It's amazing. You hear some of the numbers that these companies raise, and they
It's
blow up, and it's
unbelievable,
like,
Joe.
how did you raise 100 million and not figure it out? Like,
Right.
just because you're just going crazy, throwing money all over the
Well, I
place,
was
and
looking
just
at the
hoping.
business. I was looking at a business. They raised $1.4 billion. The company's making $30 million, Joe.
In gross
Like
revenue, right?
in
Like
gross
gross.
revenue.
Yeah, yeah, it's
And
insane.
so, what do you
Yeah,
think the math is going to look like for the investors to make a return ever?
it's insane. Yeah, like I don't even understand how that works.
Ex-
You really have to. Maybe if you create a chat GPT or something, I don't. And even
Exactly.
that might be questionable. So who knows?
100%.
But no, I appreciate all. One last question, and then a follow up with we'll end. You always end on a growth tip to the audience. But what any like you know you think areas of opportunity in e-commerce that you think worth exploring, underserved?
Yeah, I mean, I think from an e-commerce point of view, a lot of it is just kind of trends in the economy. Right now, consumers have gotten to a point where everyone's budgets are squeezed. If you look at from childcare to housing to their home budgets, it always seems like everyone's asking for their handout more and more in their pocket. Ultimately, what I find right now is that consumers appreciate something that allows them to stretch their dollar. And so some kind of value oriented messaging in this economy is, I think, super important because unless you're targeting the top 0.1% of households, which is a perfectly legitimate strategy because they have a lot of wealth. Um, if you're targeting the average consumer, definitely, I think value-oriented messaging is super important. As people gets budgets get strained, I think people tend to keep money closer to home. What does that mean? Um, Things related to their friends, family, pets, things you can tie into those sorts of things.
Yeah,
Because at the end of the day, if you have you could just watch people. You can walk down any street in America, and the dog is better taken care for taken care of for than the owner sometimes. And so people spend money on things that they care about. And so, their kids and their pets and their families and their homes tend to be, I would say, the starting point for a lot of those things. Versus if you're hitting tough times, or if you just got laid off at your job, then you might not buy that next fancy designer coat, but you're still going to buy something for your kids for school or something like that. So I think that's from an opportunity point of view, and I think um, in e-commerce, really the social media channels, and this will probably combine with kind of the growth tip, is really social commerce. Really, in the past 2 to 3 years, has really taken off in North America, and what that means is consumers turning to social media to make decisions about what products they might want to buy in the future, and to be inspired about what kind of products they might want to buy. And so developing the capability as an entrepreneur to speak on video based channels or your own podcast or something, and develop that voice, I think, is one of the top growth tips that any entrepreneur can take. Because I don't care where you're selling, you're going to have to sell yourself. And if you don't understand how to do that, then you're going to have to pay a lot of money to someone else to help you how to sell. And I
Yeah.
think that's a tough proposition, because again, it's like hiring somebody without an idea of what good looks like. And if you don't spend the sort of sweat equity yourself, making mistakes, learning from that, saying like, okay, this actually looks pretty good now, I can hire an expert to make me even better. That's a good
Yeah.
position to be in. But not hiring an expert from day one, I find you can like pretty quickly waste a lot of money.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. And just show up and do the work. It's and it's gotten so much easier where none of this stuff has to be perfect. So
Yeah.
you can show up with the
You you
camera
you can you could show up with TikTok and YouTube and an iPhone camera
and
and
crush
start
it.
selling. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's great. Well, I definitely I appreciate all said today. I think it was a really good conversation, and I appreciate what you're doing for helping businesses literally grow online. So keep growing yourself and keep helping others grow. And thank you for the time on the show today.
All right. Thanks a lot, Joe. I appreciate being on the program.
Thank you. We'll talk soon.